I'm a professor of GIS at the Columbia University School of International and Public Administration. And my second job, I'm a full-time researcher at our research institute within Columbia University known as SciESIN. And dare I say it, I'm a social scientist. I thought that might get some laughs here. Just to tell you a little bit about my organization, SciESIN is the Center for International Earth Science Information Network. It's a mouthful. It's not the best acronym, but you know, we started out with it and we stuck with it. We work at the intersection of natural, social, and information sciences, but mostly we work on bridging the gap between the social sciences and the natural sciences in an information science type way. So some of our major projects, probably our most major project is listed there first. We're the Socioeconomic Data and Applications Center for NASA. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the DACs, probably especially the Land Processes DAC. Well, we're the socioeconomic guys. And we have varying funding from a bunch of government and non-government organizations. Some projects that I specifically want to highlight here is, the African Soils Information Service, which we've been working on with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which is really instituting a lot of best management practices based on a good soil information system in the Sahel region and, especially in Ethiopia. Also, the last project listed here is our global exposure database for the global earthquake model. It's kind of the inspiration for this multi-resolution indexed framework that I'm about to talk about. And what that project looks at is summarizing a bunch of information on building types and population counts at the pixel level so that when an earthquake occurs, we're able to rapidly respond to that. So, as you get from my first couple slides, SciESIN works, we work with global data sets, a lot of global raster data sets, and data sets that come from a lot of diverse entry points. Some of what we work with comes out of a scientific instrument, a sensor. We really like that data. We can structure it. We can understand it. A lot of what we work with comes from, less error-proof means, such as surveys or census enumerations, where there's a lot of pre-processing involved to integrate those data sets and then to compare them to the sensor data. Many SciESIN and non-SciESIN gridded data sets exist, of course, at varying resolutions and varying scales. We have a user community that demands cross-tabulated socioeconomic data with natural science data. And our user community widely uses, formats like CSV or Excel. And as you see here, quite embarrassingly, I'm using Microsoft PowerPoint and not a notebook. Pretty good. But in any case, because of these varying inputs, these data integration problems, it came up over and over again that we need some kind of multi-resolution framework that can bring all of this data together and cross-tab it and summarize it and feed it out to a bunch of different users quickly and efficiently. So the advantages of the multi-resolution framework is that it summarizes data at a variety of scales. It allows for simple aggregations. And population data, we all have the tendency to look for high resolution and think that the highest resolution is the best thing. When you're dealing with data that has a lot of human error associated with it, like survey data or enumeration data, aggregation can be your friend a lot of the times. You can smooth away some of the noise and the error in the data sets, the incorrectness because of errors of commission or omission. And of course, many of our global sensor-based data sets are at lower resolutions. They're not at our 1 square kilometer resolutions. They're 2.5 minutes, and quite deservingly so, because a lot of the times the signals exist at those resolutions. The multi-resolution framework also identifies cells by location. So, we can zero in on a particular pixel or a particular group of pixels based on their indexed location. And if any of us have worked with ArcGIS or with spatial data in general, you know that spatial querying sometimes is not the most efficient thing in the world. So by creating this multi-resolution indexed framework, we're able to improve querying efficiency. Of course, we have some practical considerations. As I said, our user community uses a lot of Excel-based and CSV-based files. There are also a lot of ArcGIS Desktop users that will use Geo Tiff files or gridded files. And we also serve a lot of people in developing countries where bandwidth might be an issue, so we have a need to disseminate our data to these areas without hundreds of gigabytes of download. So in selecting our framework for our multi-resolution gridded structure, we did an analysis of what are the most commonly used data sets out there, what are the commonly used scales. And we found that the coarsest pixel resolution that you find on average is about 10 degrees. This conforms really well to some popular GIS data sets like the NASA'S STM Elevation data. And many NASA data sets are disseminated in 10-degree tiles. And the finest pixel resolution we selected was 30 arcseconds because really, practically speaking, if you're using a desktop computer, as many of our users are, a 30 arcsecond, 1 square kilometer grid is about the limit to what you can do at a global scale right now. That being said, this framework is flexible to support higher resolutions of data as well when the technology gets to the point where, on my laptop I can process a 10 meter by 10 meter global grid. So I put this slide in as a little bit of a cheat sheet for how many columns and rows we're dealing with at a global scale at these different varying resolutions. Of course, how many pixels would be considered in each one of these 10-degree tiles that we're dealing with. And we want to take a look at the bit depth of what kind of raster data are we going to need to create based on these limitations. And of course, if we were to do this and wanted to disseminate some CSV files, how many CSV files would we have to disseminate for a full global picture at each one of the varying scales? So to produce a tiled index system is a pretty straightforward thing, actually. There are required packages where the Python bindings for GDAL 1.9 and NumPy. And optionally, ArcPy. ArcPy is my basis for understanding Python. I come at this from GIS perspective, and for what it's worth, ArcPy can do a whole lot. So given a set of pixel resolutions, we want to create a multi-resolution set of geotiffs where each pixel is a sequential and unique long integer. So I'll just quickly show you the script for that, which I fear fits into some of these bad scripting, non-optimized ways of Python that we were just talking about. But it's pretty simple. Like I did some pre-processing in ArcGIS Desktop to create a basic Geo Tiff file that had the extent that I would need, so I could just read that over and over instead of having to plug it in. And you open it with GDAL. You determine the number of rows and columns based on the resolution that you're looking at. You determine the total number of pixels that you're looking at so that you can flatten the array. And eventually, I used NumPy to create just a sequential long integer raster of pixel IDs. So once you've created these pixel IDs, at your multiple scales and resolutions, you're able to leverage the system across many, various data sets that need not conform exactly to one another. I know if you've done a lot of work with GIS data, you see that one of the biggest problems is getting your administrative boundaries to match up or getting your coastlines to match up. You'll spend so much overhead just adjusting coastlines of data sets before you're able to do your analysis. In this structure, you need not do that. You can just omit cells where there's a mismatch. You can identify and omit those cells. So We can create unique pixel identifiers with robust attributes such as population count, building type, impervious surface cover percentage, infant mortality rates, environmental performance, or soil information, and again, it enables easy aggregation. So quickly go back to this script. And once again, it's a straightforward script. We're using GDAL to read in some rasters as arrays. We're shaping them and flattening them and recoding their no data values to, the common practice of -9999. You see here I create a list of 314 segments. The reason for this is that the CSV limitation that I was talking about. If you have a CSV file and you want to be able to open it and look at it in an Excel program, it can't have more than 1 million rows. So you have to limit each CSV file to around 1 million rows. So we do that, and we generate our array views, and we write out our CSV files. It's a CSV file that has a pixel ID at multiple resolutions, and then however many attributes of however many raster data sets you want to add to it. So, to bring some geography into this picture, do we have any geographers in the room besides me? All right, the ESRI guy, I'll have to meet up with you. So the modifiable areal unit problem is the idea that the interpretation of a geographic phenomenon within a map may differ due to the scale or the partitioning of space. Basically, your unit of analysis matters, and you can measure things at many different resolutions. You can measure a rainstorm at the scale of an individual storm, or you can measure the global climate system. In one sense, you're measuring the same thing. The rainstorm is part of the global climate system, but it expresses itself in very different signals. You can fully characterize a rainstorm without understanding the global climate system or characterizing it at all, and vice versa. So this diagram here shows that if we're looking at poverty data in the state of Pennsylvania, this is from a 2009 paper by Hayward and Parent. If you're looking at it at the county scale, and you're looking for the darkest areas or with the greatest amount of poverty, you see that Center County really pops out. So to a policymaker, you might think, wow, what's going on in Center County? We need to send some money there. I'm sure the people that are representing Center County are going out to the legislature and say, hey, we need some money in our county. If you change the aerial unit, to look at the census tracts instead, you see that really there's only one pocket here in Center County that's extremely poor. It's such an extreme outlier that it's pulling the whole county into this extreme category. So you figure the people, in these white areas in Center County, the rich people, they're saying, hey, we need some money for Center County, and we need new bridges in my census tract. Well, if you're a policymaker and you've looked at the county level, you may go ahead and build those bridges. So this is something that we've tried to address by creating this index solution. We can't avoid the modifiable areal unit problem, but if we use a multi-resolution framework, we can allow an analyst to look at the data as a spatial microscope. They can explore the data patterns at each one of the available scales and search for the signal that really characterizes the phenomena that they're interested in. And just to finish off, a future application of this is, that we're in the process of developing is a web processing service, OGC standard WPS service that allows users to interactively define their aerial units. And this is something that is active now only for population counts. If you're interested in this, I can talk offline with you about it. But we imagine that in the future, all of our hundreds of different raster data sets could be summarized in a WPS like this. And then if you're in a low bandwidth country and an earthquake occurs and you need to see what's going on in a particular township, you can draw that township out and get all sorts of information about it. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
So I want to understand what it is that you're doing. So Do you have one geotiff with sort of multiple bands at different resolutions, or are you creating a data set with sort of multiple geotiffs at different resolutions?
So the question is, do we have one geotiff with a stack of different resolutions, for the bands? The answer is no, really. We just have a lookup table that has all of the different index identifiers for each of the multiple resolutions. At the end of this, we feed, to feed an application like this, we're going to load all our CSV files into a post-GIS database, and it's all going to be index identifier driven.
Okay.
Other questions? So I had one. Could you talk about the linkage between the different resolutions? I mean, so how does one talk to the layer above? Is it a tree structure? Is it?
Sure. So the question is, how is there a communication linkage between the different resolutions? The answer to that is it's all based on just attribute grid IDs. So, we've put some effort into creating smart attribute IDs so that, it's not completely trivial, because if you want your IDs to be a long integer, which you do for efficiency purposes, you don't want to put latitudes and longitudes or in decimal degrees in there, or negative latitudes and longitudes. But we have put in some effort to make it hierarchical, in the sense that, in a Cartesian coordinate sense, where you can look at an ID and know which hemisphere it is in, or which country identifier it belongs to. But the short answer is it's based upon different fields. Thank you.